Up on the mountain peaks, wyverns clashed, roars and screeches tearing through the sky. Evelyn pulled Theo along as they rushed down from above. She groaned. Those wyverns were at it again. The other person beside her asked if she knew anything about that blue and white wyvern. A streak of blue and white cut through the sky. From what was known, this particular wyvern had been bullied for a long time. Despite multiple attempts to fix the situation, nothing had changed. It had been completely isolated because it wasn't a true wyvern. Theo absorbed the information, his eyes flickering with surprise. Not a wyvern? That revelation caught both of them off guard. The truth was finally revealed. It was the offspring of a female wyvern and a species known as viper. A stunned expression crossed Theo's face, his crimson eyes widening in disbelief. A viper, a first-class demon that lived deep beneath the demon sea. The idea that a viper could produce offspring with a wyvern was unheard of. Across from him, the other person spoke in a low, measured tone. That was the real mystery. That child was never supposed to exist. Theo stood frozen, words escaping him. The only thing visible was a flicker of deep contemplation in his gaze. First-class demons were considered walking catastrophes, on par with the most violent storms. Even a single one breaking past the Great Wall was enough to cause unimaginable destruction. Vipers were soul-type monsters, incredibly powerful, lurking in the darkest forests. And now, it all made sense. The Shadow Dragon's terrifying abilities. It had inherited the blood of a viper. From the moment it was born, the entire white armor dragon cavalry had been in an uproar. Even though the hybrid dragon had been accepted into the nest, it was always under scrutiny. But no matter what, the wyverns never acknowledged it. The squad had tried to help it fit in, but they couldn't just keep it locked away in isolation forever. Rejected, just for being different. Evelyn found herself mulling over the unfairness of it all. Theo, his expression serious, stared ahead. A single thought lingered in his mind. What was the name of that peculiar dragon? A deafening roar shook the skies as the dragon shot forward at terrifying speed. A voice rang out. Its name was Umbra, a word that meant shadow in the ancient tongue. Theo chuckled softly, his eyes gleaming with excitement. That name, it fit perfectly. Evelyn's eyes widened in alarm as she realized what Theo was about to do. Her voice rose in panic as she demanded to know what he was thinking. But he only kept his gaze locked forward, answering calmly and decisively. I'm choosing that dragon as my partner. Before Evelyn could even process what was happening, Theo launched himself off his mount. His body plummeted through the sky, the wind howling past his ears. A grin spread across his face as he shouted, I'm going ahead. Evelyn's heart nearly stopped. Her voice rang out in sheer panic, screaming his name as she watched him dive straight into the abyss. But Theo. He simply smiled, his resolve unshaken. This time I'll give you a different life, Umbra. Just like the one I've been given in this life. The light behind the mountains flashed like streaks of lightning. Theo leaped off the dragon's back, his body free falling through the sky. He shouted with excitement as he insisted on taking the lead. Evelyn was startled when she witnessed his reckless act. In her panic, she called out for her master with a look of deep worry. Even as he fell, Theo maintained a calm expression. The wind howled past his ears, yet his gaze remained steady. He raised his hand and activated the interface panel before him. His finger quickly swiped through the options until he selected a crucial function. From above, a barrage of swords plunged downward at a terrifying speed. Despite the freefall, Ragnar did not panic. Instead, his eyes shone with confidence. A message flashed before him, announcing that the hatchling synchro ability had been activated. He felt a surge of spiritual power flowing through his body, allowing him to control objects at will. His sword glowed in mid-air, enveloped by a brilliant blue energy. Its blade vibrated as if waiting for an order. In a decisive move, Theo rotated mid-air and landed squarely on the hovering sword. Beneath his feet, a burst of energy erupted powerfully. Stabilizing himself on the blade, Theo plummeted like a lightning bolt across the sky. The gap between him and his target rapidly diminished. He then pressed down hard on the sword, gathering momentum to dive even faster. As he manipulated the sword under his feet, he maintained perfect balance in the air. Evelyn watched with wide eyes, unable to hide her astonishment. She wondered when her master had become so adept at controlling objects with his mind. Seeing how Theo took full advantage of his power, Evelyn was even more astonished. She silently thought that his rate of development was simply unbelievable. The wyverns perched on the rocky cliffs roared in warning. They collided with one another as their wings beat fiercely, creating swirling gusts of wind. The tension among the dragons steadily increased. A silver wyvern suddenly lunged forward. Its eyes glowed with a fierce red intensity. It opened its mouth wide, ready to unleash an attack. Theo continued his descent from above. His eyes shone with absolute focus, and his entire body radiated combative energy. And those lurking in the shadows sneered mockingly. They ridiculed him with disdain, treating him as nothing more than a fool. In the past, amidst the scrutinizing gazes of the arena, Theo had collapsed onto the ground. Mocking words had echoed around him. Some even sneered about whether he truly belonged to the Ragnar family. They laughed at his weakness and claimed that even as an illegitimate child, he was too feeble. Theo's eyes burned with fury, his teeth clenched tightly. That bitter memory was still deeply ingrained in his mind. However, he was no longer the man he once was. A sword floated in midair, encased in brilliant lightning. Blue electricity coursed along its blade, radiating powerful energy. Theo stood in the air, surrounded by numerous swords shimmering with flashes of lightning. His body pulsed with surging power, and golden electricity enveloped him, creating a scene of awe-inspiring majesty. The breath of the Thunder Dragon had been activated. His eyes blazed like two fierce flames, ready to crush every obstacle in his path. Theo spread his arms wide, his body suspended mid-air. Fiery golden lightning converged around him, swirling with a terrifying force. He raised both hands high, gathering all the powerful electricity around him before suddenly unleashing a decisive blow. A gigantic bolt of lightning struck straight down to the earth, tearing through the space with destructive power. The dragon mark had been activated. A burst of energy exploded, causing the entire area to shake violently. A sword plunged forcefully into the ground as lightning enveloped its blade, creating cracks along its surface. Pillars of lightning rose in the battlefield, shrouded in radiant golden electricity. In the distance, a wyvern let out a wary cry and flapped its wings hard as it sensed the overwhelming energy. A solitary figure slowly advanced through the sheets of lightning, exuding an aura of majesty that heightened the tension around him. Theo stepped forward calmly, his eyes fixed on those who had just fled. He smiled faintly, remarking in his mind that the bullies were nothing more than cowards hiding behind masks. Standing before the dragon, he bowed slightly and, in a quiet tone, asked if it was all right. The silver wyvern remained cautious. Lowering its body, it growled warily. Its eyes shone with suspicion, uncertain whether to trust the human before it. Suddenly, the silver wyvern flapped its wings powerfully and soared into the sky. It let out a roar before quickly leaving the area. Theo reached out as if to call it back, but his gesture was in vain. Evelyn then approached, her eyes observing the situation closely. She noted that the dragon was still on guard, making it difficult to approach at that moment. She advised him to be patient and try again later. Theo shook his head, his eyes fixed with determination. He believed that this was the most important moment to stand by the dragon. If the creature had chosen to remain at its nest even when isolated, there had to be a reason. The silver wyvern continued to fly away, lonely in the vast sky. Even though it could leave the nest, it lingered in that area, as if it were waiting for something. Theo understood that emotional wounds often hurt more than physical ones. Evelyn approached and placed her hand on her dragon's back. She remarked that the creature was injured and surely could not go far. Glancing at Theo, she hinted that they should follow it and asked for his help. The wind howled through the cliffs, and the space grew tense and silent. The treacherous mountains ahead made everything even more unpredictable. The silver wyvern lay collapsed in the valley, breathing heavily. Deep wounds scarred its body and blood seeped into the ground. Its body trembled slightly as it gasped for breath. Even after fleeing, it could not hide its exhaustion. A small sound startled the wyvern. Its eyes widened as it looked cautiously toward the source of the noise. The creature quickly retreated, exuding an aura of caution. It growled, its cold eyes fixed on the approaching figure. Evelyn observed the scene and sighed softly. She recalled how many knights had tried to tame the wyvern, but all had failed. With its naturally cautious nature compounded by its current condition, it was more guarded than ever. Theo remained calm. He requested that someone bring food to the wyvern while he prepared to approach it alone. This was his initiation test, and he had no intention of giving up. Suddenly, a black wyvern swooped down from the sky. It roared with a thunderous force, exuding a terrifying majesty. The very air was filled with the fear of the wyvern shaking the ground beneath. At the same moment, a surge of red energy burst forth and engulfed the area. The fear of a low-level drake spread, throwing everything into chaos. A lone figure was blown away by the overwhelming pressure. The silver wyvern roared in response, its eyes shining fiercely as it faced the threat. It was no longer the weak, isolated creature, it was now fighting to protect itself. Theo's sharp gaze showed pure determination. He advanced slowly, each step heavy with an ominous pressure. The dragon in front reacted violently. It roared and bared its claws, ready to attack. Yet instinct made its legs back away. Then, a strange surge of energy appeared. Theo pulled a vial from his pocket. He gently applied the potion to the dragon's wounds. A glowing inscription confirmed it was a healing remedy that would quickly mend injuries and restore strength. As he applied the potion, a purple light covered the dragon's healing wounds. The creature roared in surprise at the effect. Theo asked if the pain had eased. The dragon's eyes widened. Its gaze was confused, no longer as fierce as before. He placed his hand on Umbra's thick fur and felt the warmth from its body. A fleeting thought crossed his mind, it might be because of the dragon heart. His red, piercing eyes locked onto Umbra as he clearly sensed its emotions. Soon, a burst of red smoke billowed up, fierce and raging. Umbra's anger towards the dragons that had abandoned it still burned in its mind. Theo felt the dragon's deep sorrow and its yearning to belong to the pack that had left it behind. Yet, the creature's feelings were conflicted. It was suspicious of Theo, a stranger who had appeared out of nowhere, offering unexpected warmth. The dragon lay on the ground. Its eyes remained cautious and wary. But deep inside, it hoped that the person before it would not abandon it. Theo placed his hand gently on the dragon's head. He smiled and reassured it that he would never turn his back on it. As he spoke, he raised his hand and activated his skill control panel. preparing for what was to come. Theo held a shimmering gem in his hand and smirked confidently. He knew full well that the dragon before him could not resist its allure. The gem reflected a brilliant light and radiated a mesmerizing glow. The dragon's eyes widened with a mix of astonishment and longing. He moved closer with a teasing tone, pressing the gem against the dragon. The creature immediately reacted, startled as it recognized his intent. Its eyes flickered as it quietly observed the gem, deep in thought. Suddenly, its body lit up as a powerful surge of energy burst forth. When the light faded, before him stood a majestic dragon wearing a necklace that held the precious gem. Looking at the magnificent beast, he smiled confidently. He presented a dazzling gift. He implied that if the dragon chose to follow him, there would be many more gifts like this. With a subtle smirk and eyes full of persuasive intent, he wondered aloud, in his own way, what the dragon might think. The dragon's eyes grew even wider. Its body trembled slightly, and it let out a low growl filled with confusion, as if hesitating at the unexpected offer. He studied the creature carefully before continuing. He mentioned that he had heard the dragon disliked traditional harnesses and saddles. He proposed that he could craft one for it, encrusted with jewels. The dragon tilted its head, clearly intrigued. He laughed heartily and painted an image in the air with his words. He described how the harness would be exceptionally dazzling and beautiful. Then, almost nonchalantly, he added that he had to steal a few jewels from his old lady. Far away, a long-eared woman wearing protective goggles shuddered as she sensed that something was amiss. The blacksmith stood silently. His face looked ashen, as if he had sensed something ominous. A burly man nearby glanced at her with concern. He wondered if she was all right because she didn't look well. She frowned, feeling as though she was about to lose a fortune. Elsewhere, a magnificent white dragon descended onto the ground, its bright eyes fixed intently on the young man standing before it. The young man stood tall. He showed no sign of fear as he faced the creature's piercing gaze. Suddenly, the dragon roared. Its thunderous bellow echoed across the vast land. A notification flashed, confirming that the young man had been recognized as the owner of Viper Wyvern. Theo smiled confidently as another notification popped up, announcing a new skill. The system confirmed that his character had acquired the skill Tame Wyvern. It was rated C with a mere 1% mastery. The notification promised that boosting this skill would increase the dragon's trust. That when riding together, both would gain a 10% boost in strength. In a distant place, a wyvern soared over rugged cliffs, leaving a trail of mist behind. Firm footsteps hit the ground as light snow fell around. Evelyn staggered as she led two heavy beasts. Behind her, a blue dragon panted heavily. Its sharp eyes stayed alert to everything around. She looked up, her eyes wide with amazement at the scene unfolding before her. She couldn't hide her astonishment. Evelyn was stunned to see the dragon showing such affection toward Theo. She could hardly believe her eyes until now. The dragon had never opened its heart to anyone. Theo smiled softly. He reached out and gently embraced the dragon's large head as it snuggled against him. His gaze remained calm, as if he had expected this moment all along. Watching the dragon happily feast on meat, he remarked with satisfaction that it looked very healthy. Then he turned to thank Evelyn for bringing the meat. Evelyn could not hide her curiosity. She continued to ask because she truly wanted to know what he had done. He simply smiled and replied that he had healed the wound in the dragon's heart. He glanced at the creature. When the dragon's heart began to flutter, the gift had completely opened its heart. Evelyn fell silent. Her eyes reflected a thoughtful expression as she looked at him. Observing her expression, he laughed softly. His eyes shone with delight. He asked again in an insinuating tone, as if he could not believe what he had just heard. The wyvern gently pushed the remaining meat forward, as if it wanted to offer it all to the man before it. It nodded slightly. Its eyes showed trust. He looked at the pile of meat and nodded in understanding. Evelyn squinted her eyes as she quietly observed the scene. In her mind, she thought that this was truly typical of Master Theo. Not only could he attract people, but he could also win over a wyvern. Her eyes widened in surprise at what was unfolding before her. She could not believe what she was seeing. Slowly, she clapped her hands. Her eyes were filled with astonishment and joy. She congratulated the young master for achieving such an incredible feat. Evelyn continued to watch as she murmured that the wyvern had acknowledged the man as its owner. From what she knew, when a wyvern bows its head and shows its back, it is the highest sign of trust. Evelyn jumped in shock when she saw a sudden movement. Her eyes widened in alarm. She did not understand what was happening. Calmly, Theo replied while lowering his gaze toward his companion. The wyvern had signaled for him to mount its back. Evelyn quickly objected, her voice filled with worry. She reminded him that even though the wyvern had accepted him, Theo had never been trained to fly. Riding a dragon without any harness or saddle was far too dangerous. The young man had barely begun his ascent when the panicked girl screamed, trying to stop his sudden move. But it was too late. He had already climbed onto the wyvern's back. Calmly, he explained with a confident glance downward. To him, this was nothing difficult at all. No sooner had the wyvern taken flight than a notification appeared. The tame wyvern skill had been activated to compensate for his lack of riding experience. The girl jumped back in shock as she watched the dragon soar into the sky, leaving behind a brilliant blue glow. Astonishment was evident on her face. She stood silently, her eyes filled with a mix of emotions. It seemed as though she could hardly believe what had just happened. Her gaze followed the diminishing silhouette of the dragon and its rider against the blue sky, and she sighed in deep contemplation. Unexpectedly, the wyvern let out a loud cry and dashed through sharp mountain peaks, stirring swirling gusts of wind. Instinctively, Theo held tightly to the creature's soft fur, his sharp eyes observing the situation. Realizing that the wyvern was trying to communicate something, he nodded slightly, understanding silently. If the dragon wanted to show him something, he decided to go along with it. His hand gripped the snowy fur gently as his body leaned with each powerful flap of the wyvern's wings, completely adapting to the roaring wind. The dragon sped along at a dizzying pace, its eyes burning with fierce determination. But then, Theo sensed something was off. He wondered why a dragon with such a pure heart would. He pondered, unable to fathom how that dragon had become such a fearsome creature known as the Dark Evil Dragon. A cascade of water spilled from the waterfall, creating a shroud of milky mist over the lake below. The gentle murmur of the falling water echoed through the quiet forested mountains, carrying a chill that seeped into the air. Suddenly, a strange burst of energy appeared right above the waterfall. From midair, a dark shadow began to swirl and then hurtled straight toward the water at an incredible speed. In an instant, the once calm surface of the lake was disrupted, as ripples expanded outward in all directions. Wyvern spread its wings and soared through the sky, gliding over razor-sharp mountain peaks. Theo clung tight to its back, feeling the icy wind scream past his ears. The beast then plunged near a roaring waterfall, where the crashing water filled the air. Theo squinted, quietly suspecting that the wyvern was guiding him towards something big. As Theo eased down to land paths scattered with fragile white flowers, he couldn't help but remember those endless winter treks through these mountains with black snow, thinking he knew every inch of this terrain until now, when the sight before him completely threw him off. Theo's jaw dropped as he discovered a shimmering crystal cave hidden right behind the waterfall. Watching the wyvern get all hyped up, he figured the creature must really be into anything that sparkles. Bending down, Theo's eyes locked onto a few purple blooms peeking out among the white ones. In a low murmur of wonder, he thought these flowers might be what caught the wyvern's attention. Picking up one of the purple blossoms, Theo slowly nodded as the connection became clear. The dragon had munched on these, which turned it dark and earned it the nickname Dark Shadow Dragon. He leaned closer to inspect a thick cluster of ghost spirit flowers, utterly surprised by how many were growing in one spot. Who would have thought a whole garden of these eerie, devilish blooms was hidden behind the waterfall? Glancing at a nearby info board, Theo learned that ghost spirit flowers only sprout in the demon seas, thriving on a mix of demonic energy and moonlight. He realized these rare plants were invaluable to demons but posed a serious threat to dragons. Theo couldn't shake the thought that dragons and demons were polar opposites, so it was wild that the wyvern could somehow absorb this energy. He decided then that once they left, every single one of those dangerous flowers had to go up in flames. As Theo moved toward the crystalline formations, the wyvern grew alert and let out a fierce roar. Calmly, Theo reassured the creature with his steady vibe, making it clear that he wasn't about to mess with any of the crystals. Theo stood frozen, his eyes suddenly lighting up as he noticed something off in the quiet space. He took a few more steps when he suddenly stumbled on a strange object, a kind of web stretched out between the towering crystal columns. Both he and wyvern halted, alert and cautious of this unexpected sight. Hanging in the dark void was a gaunt figure with grimy gray skin, tied up and suspended midair. The sight was downright eerie. All that was left of its face was a skull, with deep-set, empty eye sockets that seemed to scream silently. The air around it was icy, carrying a hint of death. Theo wondered if the figure might still be alive, but it soon became clear that this was just a corpse that had been dead for decades. He slowly backed away, keeping his guard up. On closer inspection, Theo realized the body hadn't decayed at all. He figured the freezing climate was partly to blame, but more importantly, it was a sign that this person had once wielded some seriously powerful magic. He guessed that the dead man was probably a high-ranking master who had been captured and left to die in this barren place. The whole situation felt super sketchy, and Theo decided he'd have to come back later to investigate further. He was about to focus on destroying all the ghost spirit flowers when he spun around and shivered. Out of nowhere, the empty eye sockets of the skeleton began to glow a fierce red, as if there was still some lingering, vengeful energy. Suddenly, the corpse let out a piercing scream, its red eyes blazing with pure malice. Theo was taken aback. He couldn't believe that the skeleton almost seemed to be calling out Kyle. Wyvern roared and spread its wings to shield Theo, while their distant companion rushed over, ready to face any threat. Theo gritted his teeth and called out for Umbra in a mix of worry and determination. He wasn't about to let that creepy skeleton launch a surprise attack, so he urged Umbra to act fast. In response, Umbra let out a deep, guttural roar that filled the air with raw aggression, a clear sign it was ready to fight. The chilling atmosphere only intensified as the skeleton's red eyes blazed with anger, its bony frame creaking ominously with every move. It let out another ear-piercing shriek and lunged forward, as if it had completely forgotten what fear was. Theo's eyes went wide in horror when he realized the skeleton was zeroing in on Umbra. His heart was pounding like crazy, and he sprang into action to protect his friend. The skeleton wasted no time, swinging its razor-sharp claws in a deadly arc. Theo charged forward with all his strength, shoving Umbra aside so that no harm would come to his teammate. Then, the skeleton let out a blood-curdling scream, loudly shouting the names Kyle and Robert with pure hatred. It vowed it would never forgive either of them, its red eyes burning with anger. Theo was stunned. He knew the skeleton wasn't just rambling, it was talking about his own dad and the Black Dragon. As the creature bit into Theo's right arm, he grimaced in pain, realizing with dread that this horrifying encounter was linked to his own family. Theo stared hard at the skeleton, desperate to figure out who or what it truly was. The unsettling feeling pushed him to uncover the truth behind all this vengeful rage. Just then, a sword flashed as it was drawn, emblazoned with the unmistakable mark of a dedicated knight. The warrior behind it gathered every ounce of strength to launch a signature move called the White-Armored Dragon Cavalry Shared Technique. Evelyn swooped in like lightning, her sword dancing as she unleashed a series of fierce strikes in what she called the Blade Barrage. The attack left a trail of faint blue light as her blade sliced clean through the skeleton, sending dark, inky blood spraying everywhere. After landing her blow, she quickly turned to Theo, her eyes full of concern as she asked if he was okay, urging him to speak up. Lying weakly on the ground, Theo managed to whisper an apology to Evelyn. He curled up, wincing and crying out in unbearable pain, as if every fiber of his body was being torn apart. Looking down at his bloodstained arm, he realized that the poison from the corpse infused with demonic energy was making his agony even worse. He could feel his strength draining fast, and he knew that without an antidote, things were about to get really critical. Evelyn quickly announced that she'd take Theo back to headquarters right away, urging him to hang in there so he could get treated in time. She tried to help him up, but Umbra growled protectively, clearly not letting anyone near Theo. Frustrated, Evelyn insisted she wasn't trying to hurt him at all, she was only trying to save his life. Umbra kept nudging Evelyn with its head, blocking any attempt to touch Theo. In a firm tone, she ordered Umbra to back off, warning that if it didn't, she'd have to intervene even if it was a teammate. Breathing heavily, Theo managed to get out a halting plea for a pause. With his eyes closed and his voice weak, he asked Umbra if it had a way to detox him. The wyvern answered with a sharp key, as if it understood exactly what he needed. Mustering a faint smile, Theo promised to entrust his life to Umbra, confident in the creature's method. Evelyn, still deeply worried, shouted that Theo was dangerously close to death from the demonic toxin, and that if they didn't get out of there immediately, things would get even worse. Theo admitted that even with proper treatment, the toxin survival rate was under 30%, but he remained determined to follow Umbra's lead. He speculated that Umbra might have had a connection with that old corpse since the dragon had eaten ghost spirit flowers and evolved into a level 2 fiend. In his mind, this meant Umbra had learned how to control demonic energy and the deadly toxins from the corpse. With a weak smile, Theo pleaded with Evelyn to trust Umbra's guidance. As Evelyn helped him up, her voice laced with worry, Umbra stood close by and let out an excited cry, clearly itching to start the healing process. Umbra then bent down, snagging a ghost spirit flower along with a shard of crystal, and crushed them together with a satisfying crunch. The shattered purple petals and crystal fragments scattered all over the ground. Lifting its head as if ready for the next step, Umbra signaled to Evelyn that she should grind up the remains and have Theo drink the concoction. Evelyn's eyes widened in disbelief as she hesitantly asked if he was really sure about this method. For a moment, Evelyn was speechless, her face etched with worry. She never imagined that the cure would involve using the very toxin that had nearly taken Theo's life. On the ground, shattered ghost spirit petals and crystal shards glittered as they lay scattered everywhere. Evelyn crouched down, torn between trusting Umbra's plan and rushing Theo to get a different kind of help. Theo lay motionless, sweat beading his brow and his breath so weak it seemed he might pass out at any second. Determined, Evelyn gritted her teeth and decided to go all in on Umbra's method, no matter the risk. She gathered every fragment of purple bloom and crystal, channeling her magic to crush them into a bright, glowing paste. Convinced this was the only shot they had to save Theo, she slowly tilted her hand, letting the thick purple liquid drip onto his lips, all the while keeping him still and hoping the remedy would kick in immediately. For a tense moment, Theo remained silent, his weak breaths barely audible and a few drops of the purple concoction clinging to his lips. It looked like he was slipping into a deep daze with no clear sign of a reaction. Evelyn sat by his side, eyes wide with worry as she monitored every change on his face. Nearby, Umbra let out soft, eager cries, as if it couldn't wait to see if this cure would work. Then, out of nowhere, Theo's eyes burst open and his chest exploded with a brilliant, radiant light. His heart pounded like never before, as if a fresh surge of power was igniting within him. Both Evelyn and Umbra were stunned, unable to believe how quickly he was bouncing back. In a hushed tone of disbelief, Evelyn wondered how he managed to snap out of it so fast. A swirling blue energy suddenly enveloped Theo, and the wounds on his body began to knit themselves shut in seconds. Overwhelmed with relief, Evelyn couldn't help but smile as she realized he was truly on the mend. But then, bright bolts of yellow electricity erupted from his body, shooting out in every direction, causing both Evelyn and Umbra to recoil in shock. The crackling energy swirled into the faint silhouette of a dragon that circled around him. In that moment, Evelyn recognized the unmistakable mark of Thunder Dragon power, a dazzling golden dragon that seemed to announce a brand new level of strength awakening inside Theo. Evelyn's eyes went wide when she saw Theo's aura slowly turning black, something she'd never seen before. Out of nowhere, a huge explosion rocked everything around them. Shocked and confused, Evelyn stepped back, not sure what was going on. Panicking, she dashed over to Theo, calling out for him. There he lay, his body soaked in dark, ominous energy, and she couldn't help but feel a surge of worry. Suddenly, the alert system kicked in, and Theo's body started cracking up as patches of dark energy flaked off. The display confirmed it. Theo had absorbed the traits of the Dark Shadow Dragon, marking a deep transformation in his dragon blood. In a blink, the scene shifted to the stern office of Commander Julius, where a crisp white and blue dragon flag hung by a warm fireplace. Julius turned around with a grim expression when he got the news. He barked at one of his aides, asking if Black Snow had verified the report yet. The aide, speaking with deference, confirmed that after thorough cross-checking, the data was about 89% accurate. The Black Snow team had double-checked everything. So furious, Commander Julius slammed his hand down on the desk and cursed the situation, clearly outraged by the results. He couldn't believe the report he'd just received. Grinding his teeth, he admitted that he'd expected something bad to go down, but he never imagined it would get this out of hand. His voice broke as he revealed a mix of confusion and anger. Even though he had been on guard, he never thought things could spiral so far out of control. In the chaos, Julius stood among shattered wood and debris, pounding on his desk and admitting that everything was completely off script. The display also mentioned Trainer Isvan, captain of White Dragon Armor Knights, Squad 5, along with 15 soldiers under his command, noting that they were a key unit on this mission. Scenes of destruction spread everywhere, tattered flags, debris, and pools of blood, with faint embers still smoldering to remind everyone of the brutal battle that had just taken place. Alongside Trainer Isvan, all his men had perished on the battlefield. Body purification is this ancient secret technique that forces your body to flush out all the impurities. It's like a hardcore detox, but with some serious risks since it messes directly with your life force. Thanks to this move, whoever uses it gets a crazy boost in their physical condition, which helps them absorb and pump up their mana big time. It's basically a way to train your body to handle some next-level breakthroughs in cultivation. Here's the kicker though, the purification process usually needs a whole squad of top-tier masters to keep a massive flow of energy going non-stop for days. They have to take turns channeling their mana to make sure the ritual never skips a beat. Up until now, this technique had only ever worked on kids under 5. No one had ever heard of an adult pulling it off on their own. Then, something wild happened. Theo managed to trigger his own body purification, and everyone was totally shook. No one could believe he pulled off the ritual solo, without any expert backup. It turned out that a crazy series of coincidences set the stage. A wild blend of dark mana, dragon blood, and ghost spirit flowers stirred up the purification process in Theo's body. A super potent corpse toxin had infected Theo, sneaking into his bloodstream. His body was literally riddled with this toxin hidden in every bit of decaying flesh, which made every wound he got insanely dangerous. The mana trapped in that toxin was off the charts, way beyond what anyone could imagine. It latched on and spread, making it super easy for someone's body to spiral into a horrifying transformation. To top it all off, the corpse's mana was also packed with demonic energy from absorbing the ghost spirit flower. This messed up mix made the toxicity even more complex and nearly impossible to break down. There he was, on his knees, struggling to fend off the dark energy coiling around him. He was groaning in pain, clearly showing just how brutal this dangerous force was. But then, out of nowhere, Umbra got this wild gut feeling and figured out how to mix some crystal shards with ghost spirit flowers to whip up an antidote. That insane coincidence turned out to be Theo's saving grace in the nick of time. These events created the perfect balance, blending both light and dark energy within Theo's body. He somehow managed to keep both mana streams flowing without any backlash. Instead of letting the dark toxin completely take over or completely purging it, Theo kept everything in check. He endured insane pressure while also absorbing demonic energy in a way no one ever expected. Theo pulled off the unbelievable by absorbing the essence of the demon shadow toxin, turning it into a new source of power. He shivered, knowing the whole process was super risky, but also opening up crazy potential. All of a sudden, Theo's eyes snapped open and his body jolted, like he'd just escaped a nightmare. He was gasping for air and drenched in sweat, clearly reeling from the brutal purification. Evelyn leaned in close, her voice thick with worry as she checked on him. She could tell he was totally spent, but at least he was still aware of everything going on around him. Weakly, Theo managed to call out for Evelyn, clutching her shoulder to steady himself. Evelyn held him tight, her face a mix of pure concern and relief that he was safe. Despite his exhaustion, Theo forced a tired smile, his lips curling just enough to try and reassure everyone. He even apologized for making Evelyn worry, silently vowing that he still had enough strength to hold his own. Evelyn let out a light laugh, clearly relieved to see Theo pull through. Even the dragon next to them nodded slightly, as if sharing in her joy. The display read that 17-year-old Theo Ragnar, known as the Tiger Electric, along with a slew of mysterious talents, had been flagged by the system. The description of body purification and demon shadow toxin confirmed that he had just gone through a major game-changing event on his journey. The alert showed that Theo was still in shock after the unexpected clash. He had unwittingly taken on the demon shadow toxin, the very same substance that formed the basis for the demon shadow in the early cycle. The system warned him to be extra cautious because if he couldn't control the toxin, he might end up as the next demon shadow. His face hardened as he felt the crushing pressure of that possibility. Staring at the alert, Theo took a deep breath, aware of the looming danger. He mulled over the power of the demon shadow, feeling a mix of excitement and caution about what it could mean. Glancing at his status board, he saw he had hit level 16 with his stats skyrocketing: Strength 112, Agility 62, Endurance 38, Mana 238, Intelligence 36, and Luck 21. His skills now included Lesser Drake's Fear, Hatchling Synchro, Wyvern Taming, plus some that were still locked. Muttering to himself, Theo realized he'd gained a whopping 85 stat points, a number almost too crazy to imagine. He could feel a surge of new power building inside him, pushing him to explore just how far he could go. Theo glanced at the crystals scattered around the cave, realizing they'd all crystallized from pure, natural energy. He figured that this energy was the key to helping both him and the Wyvern recover faster and unleash even more power. Staring at the glowing energy mass, Theo was convinced it had diluted the deadly toxicity of the Ghost Spirit Flower. In his mind, it had turned a lethal poison into a life-saving remedy. He let out a deep sigh of relief, quietly grateful that he'd trusted Umbra from the very start. But without the dragon's guidance, he knew he'd never have made it out of that mess. A tired smile spread across his face as he thought about how his already impressive Ragnar physique had become even more refined thanks to the body purification process. The new Demon Shadow trait was an extra boost, and he could feel an unstoppable surge of power building inside him. Clenching his fist, Theo felt a rush of excitement about how fast he was going to level up. He was sure that all his old limits were about to be shattered, opening the door to a future filled with endless possibilities. But then he remembered there was still more pressing business to handle, so he pushed his excitement aside and refocused on the task at hand. His eyes shifted to the lifeless body hanging in the air, and he couldn't help but wonder about the mysterious man it belonged to. Theo suspected that this guy was somehow tied to the dark secrets lurking in the cave and to that deadly corpse toxin. Standing right next to him, Evelyn watched his reactions carefully. With a cautious hand on the hilt of her sword, she was ready for any threat that might pop up. As Theo stepped closer, he noticed the tension on her face. Evelyn backed up a few steps and signaled for him to stop, clearly having discovered something important. Worried, Theo asked what was going on. Evelyn explained that someone had etched mysterious, jaw-dropping lines into the wall over there. Theo couldn't help but wonder if it was like a diary carved into the rock. Evelyn agreed that the sharp, precise lettering on such a hard surface could only have been done by someone with top-notch martial arts skills. She speculated that the author was a true master, maybe even someone who'd reached a near-divine level of skill. Then, as her gaze drifted back to the suspended corpse, her mind began to race with questions about the mysterious man's true identity. On the rock wall, carved letters spilled the tea. This guy had been beaten by Kyle and Robert and then hid out here, scheming his revenge. But he admitted his body was totally worn out, not strong enough to pull off his plan. The skeleton wailed, continuously shouting out Kyle and Robert's names in pure spite. Its screams echoed through the cave, turning the vibe even creepier. Theo fell silent, his eyes flashing red at the sound of those names. In a hazy moment, he realized that the skeleton was referring to his own dad and the Black Dragon, sparking a gut feeling that something major was about to go down. The mysterious man realized his body was deteriorating fast, probably because Robert's attack had totally wrecked his mana channel. Despair set in, as he admitted that his wounds made any chance of recovery even slimmer. He had to chug Ghost Spirit flowers just to hang on, but the dark toxin in them was slowly eating away at his mind and body. He began losing control, slowly spiraling into madness. Cursing his fate, the man seethed with bitterness about not being able to get his revenge before falling apart. He acknowledged that his consciousness was fading, and his frequent outbursts forced him into making a final call. Resigned to the fact that survival was out of the question, he decided to leave everything behind, even sacrificing his prized emerald serpent sword to seal his fate within this cave. He hoped someone would eventually find this place, pick up his legacy, and carry out his revenge. He prayed that his successor would be strong enough to beat Kyle and Robert and finish the unfinished business. The man declared that his entire legacy was left behind here, banking on someone eventually stepping up to turn his wish for vengeance into reality. Theo and Evelyn both gaped as if they'd just stumbled on a horrifying secret. They exchanged confused looks, barely believing what was unfolding right before their eyes. Evelyn read further down the carved text and was stunned to spot the flying sword technique and the title Storm God mentioned. She couldn't help but think that this mysterious guy might just be the one behind the legendary wind technique. In that moment, Theo suddenly pieced together the identity of the mystery man, especially when Evelyn mentioned a tragic hero who had gone toe-to-toe with the current tribal chief 40 years ago. A chill ran down his spine as he imagined the brutal power struggle that must have gone down back then. Images of a wandering warrior effortlessly channeling swirling winds across the battlefield brought to mind the sheer majesty of a true master. Theo and Evelyn stood in silent awe, feeling a mix of deep respect and sorrow for the tragic fate that befell this man. Evelyn was taken aback when she realized that the man was none other than Wine Duke Hector Ragnar. She recalled the wild rumors that he had died in a brutal power struggle, and no one ever thought he'd managed to survive until now. Theo repeated the name Hector Ragnar under his breath, his heart a whirlwind of conflicting emotions. He remembered the old legends about a warrior as fast as the wind, only to learn that he had withered away in this gloomy cave. Evelyn shuddered as she contemplated the mysteries Hector had left behind in his half-finished quest for revenge spanning 40 years. With her head bowed, she wondered if Hector's destiny might have been different if he hadn't been so gravely injured. Kneeling down, Evelyn pressed her hand to her chest in a gesture of reverence for Hector's legacy. She knew that despite everything, this man remained a noble part of the Ragnar bloodline. Theo raised an eyebrow, a hint of surprise in his tone as he silently questioned Evelyn's show of respect for someone once dismissed as a loser. The fleeting image of the black dragon flashed in his mind, a reminder of Hector's downfall at the hands of the current tribal chief. Despite his defeat, Hector still carried the Ragnar blood, holding on to his rightful claim to the family name. Stunned, Theo realized that even in his fall, Wine Duke was an irreplaceable piece of the family puzzle. He understood that this harsh truth was bound to shake up the future and the very idea of inheritance in the Ragnar clan. Overcome with emotion, Evelyn's eyes filled with tears as regret washed over her. She silently berated herself for the harsh way she'd treated Theo, a bearer of the Ragnar legacy. To her, any disrespect toward the future heir was a crime so grave it might even warrant immediate execution. Trembling with remorse, Evelyn admitted to herself that she had made a terrible mistake, feeling unworthy to stand in Theo's presence. Her heart pounded with fear over the possibility of severe consequences for her actions. Theo cut off Evelyn's rambling, telling her to chill with the nonsense. He gave her a calm look that made it clear he wasn't holding any grudges or planning to blame her for anything. With a relaxed smile, he explained that the person Evelyn had killed wasn't even a true Ragnar, it was just a madman. Theo made it clear that Evelyn had no other choice if she wanted to save his life. Evelyn stuttered, insisting that the family rules didn't let her act on a whim. She was still scared of getting punished for breaking one of the clan's strict taboos. Then, Theo turned around, confidently ordering that everything that went down in that cave stay under wraps. Evelyn jumped in surprise, not expecting him to make such a bold move. He told her that if she still felt guilty, she could do something to make up for it, something she could decide on her own to ease her conscience. Theo suggested that she take on the secret technique of the Wind Duke as a form of atonement. He figured it was the perfect chance for her to get stronger and put her past mistakes behind her. Evelyn was floored when Theo mentioned the Wind Duke's skills, which were on par with the legendary prowess of the 9 dragons. She knew that kind of technique was ultra rare and valuable, definitely not something just anyone could handle. But she quickly protested, insisting she wasn't worthy of such a precious legacy. Collapsing to her knees, she looked torn between a burning desire to rise above and a heavy sense of unworthiness. Theo looked at her with genuine concern and urged her to become the heir of the Wind Duke, promising that it would only make her stronger. He hoped she could carry on Hector's legacy and transform it into her own power. He emphasized that embodying the spirit of the Wind Duke would help her grow and perfect herself. Theo was convinced that she wouldn't just bear the burden of this legacy but would ignite a whole new flame in that rare art of swordplay. Evelyn froze at his proposal, her heart pounding as she realized the huge responsibility it entailed. Looking up at Theo with deep gratitude, she finally recognized the trust he was placing in her. Theo wrapped it up by saying that if Evelyn became the Wind Duke's disciple, his soul would finally find peace. He also pointed out that once she was recognized as his student, no one would have the right to hold her accountable for what had happened. Theo recalled Evelyn's old vow she had promised to become the sword that would protect him. With a determined smile, he wanted her to remember the goal and the responsibility tied to that promise. Evelyn bowed her head as she felt Theo's hand settle on her shoulder. She understood that he was placing all his trust in her, urging her to step into the new path he'd opened. Tears welled in her eyes as she hesitated, unsure of what to say. She bit her lip, silently chastising herself for the mistakes of her past. Introducing herself with pride, Evelyn declared, "I am Evelyn Nerevel, a high-ranking swordswoman of the Ragnar clan, vowing to give everything she had to honor that title." Kneeling on one knee, she placed her hand over her heart to mark her resolve, lifting her head so that her eyes shone with fierce determination to face whatever came next. She pledged her undying loyalty, vowing to serve Lord Theo Ragnar as a steadfast retainer. In a sincere, respectful tone, she offered her oath, hoping he would accept her commitment. With genuine humility, Evelyn begged Lord Theo to accept this humble promise. She bowed even lower, showing the absolute respect she had for the man she swore to protect. Theo couldn't help but chuckle inwardly. Evelyn was always so serious and by the book. He treasured her sincerity, though he couldn't help but find her rigidity a bit amusing. Drawing his sword, Theo let its gleaming edge brush lightly against Evelyn's shoulder in a ceremonial gesture. In a solemn voice, he vowed to etch her loyal oath into his heart. Officially, he declared Evelyn Nerevel as his new companion on the rough road ahead, dubbing her his first sword, marking the beginning of their unique master-servant bond. A warm smile passed between them as they both felt the solid connection their vows had forged. Umbra then stepped forward, nodding respectfully in a silent congratulation. The dragon seemed genuinely pleased to see that its master and Evelyn had found complete understanding in each other. Outside the cave, waterfalls roared against a backdrop of clear blue skies and towering, majestic mountains. Theo and his team left, their hearts full of trust and determination for the new journey ahead. The sunset painted the sky in shades of red, draping the jagged mountain peaks, as if they were reaching for the clouds. Below lay a vast plaza within an imposing fortress, the garrison of the White Armored Dragon Cavalry. A towering structure proudly bearing the sign White Armored Dragon Cavalry Headquarters exuded a sense of solemnity. Inside, groups of knights busily inspected their gear, while dragons stood in orderly lines awaiting orders. A tall, red-haired knight burst into laughter, bragging that even someone with Theo's reputation hadn't yet returned. He joked, with a challenging tone, that perhaps his own talent as a dragon knight might one day outshine Theo's. Then, a lone figure slowly stepped into the plaza, his boots echoing a crisp clack on the stone. The training knights raised their heads and fell silent as they recognized the unexpected guest. The red-haired knight's expression froze in shock, his face momentarily blank, as he muttered in disbelief. Nobody had expected the person they'd spoken of to reappear so suddenly. Theo Ragnar dismounted alongside a massive white dragon, causing a stir among the crowd. The red-haired knight cried out in alarm, his voice a mix of awe and fear at the sight of the mysterious companion that Theo had brought along. The knights erupted into whispers of admiration when they noticed Umbra, the stubborn dragon, now following Theo. They speculated that only a genius of 1,000 years could tame such a hard-headed creature, and even the red-haired knight had to admit that choosing a partner like Umbra was a feat of extraordinary talent. He sighed, recognizing that Theo's reputation was no exaggeration. Shortly after, Evelyn and Theo strode into the plaza to announce that High Swordswoman Evelyn Nerevel and Low Swordsman Theo Ragnar had completed the capacity challenge. The supervisor, clearly taken aback, prepared to ask for more details since the results were completely unexpected. With urgency in his tone, Theo asked a nearby knight about the commander's whereabouts, clearly worried about the situation and eager to meet with the commander immediately. A blonde-haired knight replied that the commander had just hurried back to the office after receiving an urgent message. Apparently, a serious incident had occurred, leaving no time for delay. Evelyn was totally shocked, repeating urgent message under her breath, wondering what could have forced the commander to move so fast. She and Theo exchanged worried looks, both feeling the tension in the air. Suddenly, a blonde knight whipped around as a blast of energy hit, creating a massive explosion. Dust and debris flew everywhere, clear signs that an unexpected attack had just hit the training area. Without missing a beat, Evelyn and Theo snapped into defense mode, eyes fixed on a dark, snarling beast charging at them. Its giant claws ripped up the floor, sending the surrounding knights into a panic as they scrambled to retreat. Out of nowhere, a high-ranking officer riding a dragon swooped in, urgently announcing that a new urgent message had come in. He apologized for having to break the news right after the test, but ordered everyone to head to the main hall immediately for their mission. A stern officer sporting an eye patch declared that everyone was to be deployed to Blanky Fortress. This order instantly set off a buzz among the knights, with everyone speculating about the emergency mission. Theo fell silent as the news sank in, thinking to himself that they were about to step into a real battlefield. The knights around him were chattering, still trying to figure out what was happening while feeling the pressure mounting. Gazing off into the distance, Theo murmured about the Seers Guild kidnapping incident at Blanky Fortress. He recognized the stir of chaos from a memory of his past life and silently vowed to step in and change the future. He recalled that the whole point of the kidnapping was to snatch the dragon-slaying sword Balmung and then pull off a coup. He vividly pictured the sword impaling a dragon, a scene dripping with blood and dark schemes. In his mind's eye, a shadowy figure in a black coat emerged, his face hidden behind streaks of blazing red mana. Clutching a blood-soaked sword, the guy's cold, merciless smile showed zero hesitation when it came to killing his foes. The mastermind, Ed Troyvan, was the name whispered as the brain behind the whole mess. Narrowing his eyes, Theo felt a burning determination to shut down this plot before it spiraled into an even bigger nightmare. A man with icy eyes stood before everyone, his deep voice booming as he announced that every single one of them was being deployed to Fort Blankwy. He laid down the law hard, making it clear that no one could say no. His sharp stare only cranked up the tension in the air. People nearby began whispering, and some looked straight up uneasy, exchanging glances as they wondered if this mission was really worth the risk. One guy, clearly confused, asked the commander why they were throwing these raw, untrained recruits into the mix. He just couldn't wrap his head around why the mission was so damn important. Then the commander brought up Company 5, led by Major Izven, mentioning an urgent situation involving him. Apparently, Major Izven and his 14 crew members had lost contact, and the news hit everyone like a ton of bricks. The nearby crowd instantly tensed up, realizing that things were way more dangerous than they'd thought. Soon enough, the spotlight shifted to Trainer Izven, the most seasoned knight in the White Dragon Knights. This guy had even helped out Julius, who always sought his advice. Standing in front of Trainer Izven, the young recruit felt reassured, believing that the knight wouldn't back down easily and that he could handle any situation. Then it hit him: the changes he'd set in motion might be sparking a crazy butterfly effect, making everything way more complicated than he'd planned. The commander then broke the news in a grave tone, citing a report from Black Snow. There was an 89% chance that they'd already lost their comrades. He even suggested that if any of them were still hanging on, they wouldn't be strong enough to push through. According to him, the only unit ready to roll was Company 5, which was now tasked with picking up the slack and finishing the mission. He declared that, for now, Evelyn Nereville would lead Company 5 and ordered everyone to complete their training in just 3 days to be mission ready. Clenching his fist tightly, the commander made it clear that he wasn't buying the idea that they were all gone. He was dead set on proving otherwise. He announced that, no matter what, they had to avenge their fallen comrades. His rock-solid tone instantly silenced everyone. The scene then shifted to a vast sky painted with a vibrant sunset. The crew was gearing up, ready to tackle the gnarly mission ahead. The Black Skull Gang had stirred up major drama by kidnapping a member of the Sears Merchant Guild. Thanks to the White Dragon Knight's quick intervention, what seemed like a total disaster ended up with almost no casualties. Everyone believed the crisis was over, all thanks to the Knight's heroics. But in reality, there was a hidden secret that no one saw coming. Inside a warehouse stacked high with wooden crates, the real motive behind the kidnapping slowly came to light. The masterminds had a totally different plan, one that went way beyond what the public had assumed. It turned out that the Dragon Slayer sword Balmung had been stolen and quietly smuggled out. This twist revealed the true purpose behind the earlier abduction. Ed Trovan then used the moment when Balmung was revealed to spark a coup. Carrying the sword with an air of raw ambition, he was clearly gearing up for a massive, game-changing move. There, one young guy suddenly realized that everything was taking a completely different turn from his previous life. He started wondering if his own actions had set this crazy chain of events in motion. Lowering his eyes, he blamed himself and wondered what he should do next if it all turned out to be his fault. Even though he was seriously freaking out, he knew he couldn't shirk his responsibilities. He vowed to get to the bottom of everything once and for all. His eyes hardened with determination, showing he was ready to face the truth head-on. Then, an unexpected hidden message popped up, demanding that he retrieve the Balmung sword. This new mission promised to drag him into even more wild twists and turns. 3 days later, heavy snow blanketed the towering mountains under a frosty moon. The silence was absolute, broken only by the whistling wind cutting through the cold night. A guy standing on a lookout shivered and groaned about the brutal weather. He shook his head, trying hard to adjust to the bone-chilling cold that still felt totally unfamiliar. When he finally looked up at the sky, he noticed something off about the moon. It just looked weird. He couldn't help but wonder why the moon had suddenly become so strange. A panicked soldier let out a shout when he spotted the White Dragon Knights charging through the sky. He couldn't believe they'd show up in this godforsaken place. Someone clung to the edge of a wall with a gloved hand, signaling that they'd just climbed up. The soft scratching sounds in the snowy wind hinted that this mysterious figure was making their way inside. Down at the base of the tower, another soldier frantically sounded the alarm, urging everyone to get ready to fight. He confirmed that the attackers were the White Dragon Knights, which immediately sent the unit into a state of high alert. In the chaos, one soldier hurled his weapon as a burst of purple energy exploded atop the tower. He staggered backward, clearly terrified by the sudden, massive power. Up above, a pink-haired knight gripped her weapon tightly and barked orders for airdrop bombs. Her voice boomed as she rallied her teammates to launch their attack. Massive dragons with outstretched wings soared overhead, dropping glittering bombs into the snowy sky. The scene quickly descended into chaos, signaling that a brutal battle was about to break out. A blazing purple bomb hurtled downward like a death arrow, primed to collide and foretelling a horrific explosion. When the blast erupted, a powerful shockwave swept through the area. The ground trembled, the walls cracked, and a thick cloud of smoke and dust filled the air. A soldier screamed, ordering everyone to fall back into the fortress to avoid needless casualties. In his panic, he warned his comrades not to recklessly charge out into the dangerous fray. As knights descended from above, they nimbly dodged the flying debris while relentlessly charging the enemy's defensive line, determined not to miss their chance to strike. The guards on the ground immediately countered, swinging their weapons in a fierce retaliation. A swift slash from a white dragon knight sent several adversaries flying aside. His sword cut through the air, leaving a vivid red trail against the snowy night. The clash quickly turned bloody, marking the battle as one of ferocity and relentless conflict. The entire unit of white dragon knights surged down together with an overwhelming force, as if they were hell-bent on wiping out every last enemy. Their commander bellowed orders that spared no one. Nobody was to be left standing. They split up, swinging their swords hard into the enemy's ranks. The barrage of attacks left the opposition in utter disarray. Then, a golden-haired knight roared at her team, reminding them to make the enemy pay for messing with the white dragon knights. Her voice echoed powerfully, pushing everyone to give it their all in the fight. Atop the mountain, flames roared as the aftermath of the attack lay in ruins. Black smoke billowed, blanketing the snowy landscape in a murky haze. The lone survivor weaved through the trees, fuming because his crew had promised to block the knight's path. He muttered under his breath that he'd nearly kicked the bucket if he hadn't bailed in time. Gripping his spear tightly, he kept griping about having to bail amid the chaos. Bitter and frustrated, he realized that the opposition was way stronger than his buddies had expected. Meanwhile, another soldier cracked a smug laugh, convinced that as long as he delivered what he was carrying, his mission was a done deal. He was already hyped up, daydreaming about the good life waiting for him afterward. Out of nowhere, a dark figure appeared from behind, moving with lightning speed. A cold, ruthless sword slashed through the air, spraying blood everywhere before the soldier could even scream. The attacker stood tall, his blood-stained blade still dripping. His cloak fluttered in the wind, radiating an aura of mystery and merciless intent. With one swift swing, the cloaked figure unleashed a brutal strike that cracked the very ground. The soldier's body flew into the air, blood mingling with the falling snow. Then, the cloaked figure paused, his eyes fixed calmly on the sword in his hand as he let the silence of the thickening snowfall speak for him. Soon after, another person showed up, questioning the cloaked one about the goods they were holding. The mysterious figure handed over the sword, confirming it was exactly what they needed. He inspected the sword closely and, satisfied that it was indeed the item they were after, nodded to himself. Everything was falling into place. He then announced that the target had been secured and barked orders for his crew to move on to the next phase of their plan. The group responded in unison, ready to execute the orders. Glancing toward the distant burning fortress, the cloaked figure mused silently. He realized that he was just a few steps away from finalizing his nefarious plot. With his eyes blazing red, he swept a look over the artillery lined up, vowing to obliterate anyone who dared stand in his way. And to him, the opponents were nothing more than pests that needed to be eradicated. Suddenly, a soldier let out a fierce yell and charged forward with all his might, sweat and tension etched on his face. Despite his powerful swings, a crushing blow sent him reeling, his head knocked sideways in a moment of sheer chaos. The white dragon knights gathered in front of the captured soldiers, confidently declaring that the resistance had been crushed. They boasted that the suppression was complete, and that the entire area was now under their control. A black-haired guy laughed out loud, convinced that the mission had been way too easy. He and his buddies agreed that everything was going smoother than expected. Still, he couldn't shake the disbelief over Company 5 supposedly being wiped out entirely. Something felt off, making him extra cautious. Realizing there was still an unanswered angle, he activated his hatchling synchro skill, signaling that he was ready to face the next mystery head-on. He then used his memory-reading ability to gather every bit of info about Balmung, hoping to uncover a key clue that would point to the mastermind behind it all. He discovered that even his target only knew that the sword had been stolen but had never actually seen it. That left him puzzled. Why were even the participants in the plot so clueless about Balmung? He started wondering if this had something to do with a secret that even their higher-ups were keeping under wraps. Unsure of what he might have missed, he felt the urge to dig deeper. At that moment, a bespectacled girl asked Theo if something was wrong, showing genuine concern. He waved her off, explaining he was just lost in thought and that nothing serious was up. A golden-haired knight then burst out laughing, teasing that even though Theo was nicknamed Lightning Tiger, he was still just a rookie, probably freaking out about his first time in battle. She suggested that the group should head back and regroup with Company 5 after successfully rescuing the hostage. One of the knights agreed, saying he'd follow her lead and was looking forward to getting back home. He even grumbled about still reeking of gunpowder from the fight. Suddenly, Theo's eyes widened, his irises flashing a deep red as if he'd spotted something seriously off. His intense stare brought the whole scene to a halt. Without wasting another second, Theo clutched his sword and charged ahead, leaving his two stunned comrades behind. They quickly followed, trying to figure out what had just gone down. The golden-haired knight, surprised, asked the bespectacled girl why Theo had bolted like that. She guessed maybe he was fed up with the lingering smell of gunpowder on his clothes. The bespectacled girl and the golden-haired knight exchanged puzzled looks, totally clueless about what had just gone down. They wondered why Theo had suddenly bolted out of nowhere. Then, a guy dressed in all black, armed and grinning with a cold smile, readied himself to strike at lightning speed. He exuded pure danger. His sword flashed as it slashed through the air, sending a powerful shockwave down the wall that shattered stones into pieces. That brutal strike was the harbinger of an all-out brawl about to erupt. Theo nodded to himself, convinced that his gut feeling was spot on. The bespectacled girl, still in shock, demanded to know what was happening, completely thrown off by Theo's sudden move. Both the golden-haired knight and the bespectacled girl stood frozen, eyes wide at the unfolding scene. They couldn't believe that danger was lurking right inside the fortress. Staring ahead, they spotted stacked crates of explosives and realized that the enemy planned to self-destruct and take everything down with them. Rage and fear surged through them as they recognized the urgent need to stop this crazy plan immediately. A black-haired knight barked orders for everyone to scram, calling on the Lank crew to evacuate so that no one would get left behind. Suddenly, a dark, ominous sphere appeared, like a harbinger of impending disaster. Everyone held their breath, anxiously waiting to see what would go down next. Theo and the rest of the group looked up at the sky, noticing a deadly threat hurtling toward them at a terrifying speed. The tension was palpable as they realized there wasn't much time to escape the coming explosion. Out of nowhere, a jet black-haired guy screamed at the top of his lungs, his voice cutting through the tension as he urged everyone to get the hell out of there, terrified of the imminent blast. Then, a monstrous explosion erupted, fire and thick smoke hurled everything around, and the ground shook violently, plunging the scene into utter chaos. Amidst the turmoil, a calm, cloaked figure issued orders for his troops to reload without a hint of hesitation. He stepped back, poised and ready for the next wave of attack. A row of cannons stood in line, all set to fire under the cold night sky. The soldiers gathered around, waiting for the next attack signal. The cloaked guy snapped his fingers, giving a clear signal. Without a second thought, he ordered his crew to lob their ammo at the enemy, who were clearly in a weak spot. One explosion after another ripped through the area, sending debris and flames flying everywhere. The sheer force was insane. It tore up the ground and buried everything under a blanket of smoke and fire. The cloaked leader declared that they had to wipe them out completely, no survivors allowed. His icy smile screamed pure brutality, showing he was dead set on clearing out the opposition. The scene then shifted to a grand castle with towering spires piercing the snowy night. Faint lights spilled out of its windows, hinting that something mysterious was going on inside. Inside a spacious room, heavy, ragged breaths echoed in the tense silence. The atmosphere was so thick with anxiety that it felt like everyone inside was either scared stiff or lost in deep thought. A woman cradled little Axion in her arms and softly asked if he was hurting too much. She tried to soothe him with her gentle, caring voice. But then her expression shifted dramatically. Her eyes lit up with a mad, vengeful glare as she vowed to bring back the head of whoever had hurt her child. Her voice, dripping with anger and thirst for revenge, promised that a storm of fury was about to break loose. Clashing weapons echoed throughout the fortress as the battle turned vicious, with both sides charging at each other full of determination. Evelyn swung her sword with no hesitation, her icy gaze locked on the enemy as she sliced anyone who got in her way. Not letting a single foe slip away, she barked orders and her crew immediately started chasing down any stragglers. Standing in the thick of the chaos, Evelyn couldn't help but wonder how the enemy managed to take down Captain Trainor's 5th squad. She quickly brushed off the thought, but an uneasy feeling told her something was seriously off. Suddenly, her eyes narrowed. She realized danger was lurking right by her side. Out of nowhere, a massive explosion rocked the scene, throwing Evelyn into the smoky, fiery mess while her teammates shouted her name in alarm. She hit the ground hard but quickly regained her balance, her eyes intense with tension. Muttering a curse under her breath, she knew things were getting way worse than anyone had predicted. Then, a relentless barrage of airstrikes began raining down from the sky, a full-scale bombing run. Evelyn immediately recognized the threat and shouted for her team to find cover ASAP. In the chaos, a panicked soldier sprinted through the explosions, painful screams echoing all around. Desperate to escape the blast zone, Evelyn found that the fierce airstrikes were still on her tail. Explosions continued to tear through the area, flinging rocks and debris everywhere as soldiers cried out in agony, falling amid the chaos. Amid all the turmoil, Evelyn caught sight of a dazzling light cutting through a massive doorway in the distance, the only way out. She quickly urged her crew to head for that exit, hoping it would keep them out of the bombardment. A few soldiers, completely freaking out, ran up while calling her name in sheer worry, sticking close to her and ready to take on any enemy still hiding around. Evelyn heard her teammates hollering that the bombardment was even crazier than before. She immediately rallied everyone to scram from the area before they got buried under the barrage. They all agreed it was best to head toward the wall opposite the incoming shelling, and Evelyn urged the team to pick up the pace and get out of the devastation zone. Out of nowhere, a bright alert popped up in front of Theo, announcing that his mind gate had just been unlocked. He shuddered for a split second as a surge of new power started bubbling up inside him. Suddenly, Theo felt his brain firing on all cylinders. Every sound around him became insanely clear. Clenching his fists, he realized his body was way more agile now, and he was ready to handle whatever came his way. Then, a vivid blue beam exploded into existence, so intense that Theo had to squint. He was stunned to see that this energy was directly syncing with his consciousness. In a flash, he found himself immersed in a sea of blue data blocks, almost like he was peeking into the very architecture of the fortress. Every detail of the terrain and every secret passageway lit up in front of him, crystal clear. Theo silently recognized that this was the game-changing moment they needed, but he also knew he couldn't waste any time. Just as his eyes lit up with that wild, new energy, Evelyn grabbed Theo by the shoulder, snapping him back to reality. She urgently told him they had to bounce from the area, or else they'd be buried under the incoming artillery. Clutching his arm tightly, she commanded him to lead the way out of the fortress and find a safe spot. Together, they bolted, dodging flames and explosions that were closing in fast. Amid the chaos, Evelyn's panic was off the charts. She shouted at everyone, demanding to know why they'd even slowed down when time was ticking. She quickly reminded them that they had to leave immediately, or there'd be no way out alive. In response, Theo stood his ground, insisting they needed to push deeper into the fortress. Despite the sweat streaming down his face, he was convinced that was the only route to flip the odds in their favor. Evelyn was left speechless for a moment by his unexpected decision, hesitating before finally gritting her teeth and nodding in reluctant agreement. No sooner had they made up their minds than the whole squad found themselves under a fresh wave of attack, forcing them to charge even further into the building. Massive chunks of debris kept raining down, creating a relentless cacophony of impacts. Giant blocks from the fortress ceiling crashed down with such force that everyone had to scramble to avoid them, and the ground trembled so hard that their footing felt completely off balance. A red-haired warrior grumbled that if they stayed any longer, they'd all be crushed. Someone else reminded everyone that 21 lives were on the line, so giving up simply wasn't an option. Theo gritted his teeth, fuming as he wondered if they should have bailed out of the fortress from the get-go. But as he scanned the chaos around him, he was determined to keep moving forward. There was no time to backtrack now. He explained that the area outside was swarming with heavy artillery and waiting ambushes, calling it a trap meticulously set by the enemy. Quietly, Theo activated his hatchling synchro skill, using the fortress's memory to scout out a safe route. A stream of blue text flashed before his eyes, signaling that the sync process had begun. With debris raining down and dangerous cracks forming on the fortress floor, he steadied himself, prepared for whatever was about to hit. In that moment, Theo realized the enemy underestimated them, thinking no one could survive inside the fortress. A sly smile played on his lips as he saw a complex network of the fortress unfold right before him. He reached out to interact with the virtual display, analyzing every potential escape route. Confident in his newfound skills, he believed they could make it out even if it meant venturing deeper into enemy territory. It felt like he held the key to their survival. The blue text reappeared, announcing that Hatchling Synchro had been massively powered up now that his mind gate had opened. Understanding that this was their only shot to flip the tables, Theo quickly signaled the whole crew to get ready. Scanning the virtual map, he noticed a secret explosive storage area on the left and warned everyone to steer clear of it. On the right, relentless artillery fire was tearing through the fortress walls, and he knew going that way was a death sentence. Instead, he pinpointed the central staircase as their only viable escape route. The group exchanged determined looks and plunged deeper into the fortress, hoping to break free from the deadly siege. They rushed down the central staircase, dodging a downpour of shattered bricks from above. Explosions kept echoing behind them, urging them to sprint faster. At one point, a soldier nearly lost his footing under the pressure of an explosion, but a teammate pulled him back just in time. Leading the charge was an orange-haired female warrior, her jaw set as she barked for everyone to stick together and speed up. Suddenly, they discovered a door at the end of the stairs, its dim light barely filtering in. For a few breathless seconds, everyone hesitated, unsure if it was a true escape or yet another trap. Panic spread when they realized it was a dead end. Anxiety rippled through the group as someone nervously reminded them that Theo had urged them to trust his lead. A trembling soldier asked if Theo had a solid plan, since there was no going back now. Then, a red-haired female fighter looked up in horror and screamed that the fortress ceiling was collapsing. She urgently commanded the team to find cover or another exit before they were buried alive. As huge rocks crashed down from above, forcing everyone to dodge in sheer terror. People exchanged panicked looks, desperately trying to figure out how to escape the crumbling chaos. The red-haired warrior was in full panic mode as giant boulders tumbled down, tears streaming down her dusty, grimy face. She shot a glance at Theo and saw that his eyes were still burning with determination to overcome the mess. The rocks kept falling, piling up into heaps of ruin everywhere. The team struggled to stay together as they dodged the relentless, brutal shower of stone. Meanwhile, the fortress itself burned fiercely in the night, dark smoke billowing high and tinting the sky red. In the distance, explosions echoed a constant reminder that this battle was far from over. A soldier in a black cloak reported that they'd run out of reserve cannonballs. Standing stiffly, he waited for the next orders from their commander. Clenching a metal piece tightly, the commander reminded himself not to forget their revenge mission for Prince Axion. He took a deep breath, summoning every bit of resolve for the next move, insisting that no matter what, they had to gather every scrap of evidence to achieve their goal. The man in the black cloak ordered the retrieval of the head of the enemy who had just been buried beneath the rubble. His cold tone left no doubt about his determination to see their revenge plan through. All the while, more rocks tumbled down, piling into chaotic heaps. Dust filled the air, hiding everything in a bleak shroud that made it seem like life had been snuffed out in that place. Below in the basement, Theo's group lay piled up, catching their breath after barely escaping death. A few soldiers broke into relieved smiles, praising Theo for taking out the floor right on time and saving them at the last second. Suddenly, a squad of soldiers appeared, weapons drawn, demanding to know who they were and how they'd managed to break in. Before they could answer, Theo's crew found themselves completely surrounded, forced to be on high alert for any sudden attack. Theo frowned, silently wondering why Black Skull had also shown up in this mess. He muttered to himself that he only went in because the space under the corridor seemed deeper than usual. His red eyes flashed in shock as he sensed an unexpected threat closing in. Instantly, he gripped his weapon tighter, readying himself for the worst. Then Theo's team was jolted by the sight of shadowy figures locked behind iron bars in a dark basement. A few soldiers, panic-stricken, gasped as they recognized these prisoners as their own comrades. Among them was an older man with graying hair and a scraggly frame, yet his spirit shone through. He raised his head in surprise at the sudden intrusion. One soldier whispered in disbelief, realizing the man was none other than Captain Trainer Isvan, someone they thought had been lost forever. Though heavily chained and covered in grime, his eyes still held a steely determination. The cold metal bars kept him and the other prisoners separated from the outside freedom, and Theo's group quickly readied themselves to break the locks and free their captive teammates. The red-haired soldier moved closer to Captain Trainer, relieved to see he was still breathing. She hurried to help the wounded, checking on the captain's condition. Amid the chaos, Evelyn was utterly shocked and couldn't believe that the Central Intelligence Unit of the Ragnar clan was behind all this. Clutching her hands tightly, she felt a mix of anger and betrayal burning inside her. The shattered chains fell apart, freeing Captain Trainer and the imprisoned soldiers. They got up, rubbing their wrists where the cuffs had left their marks, all seething with anger at the betrayal they'd just uncovered. Captain Trainer, calm as ever, remarked that the orange-haired warrior hadn't been too shocked by the Central Intelligence Unit's backstabbing. He noted that she'd probably had a hunch all along, it just hadn't been backed by solid proof until now. Evelyn bowed her head, admitting that she had suspected there was a mole, but she never imagined they'd go so far as to draw their blades against their own kin. Clenching her fists, she silently vowed not to let this traitor off the hook. A female soldier yelled that this was outright treason, unforgivable, while a hot-headed blonde soldier fumed that they needed to strike back hard. Both charged ahead, making it clear they were done holding back against the enemy. In a stern tone, Captain Trainer advised everyone to chill out, pointing out that the enemy had been well prepared from the start. He reminded them that with their current numbers, a head-on fight was a no-go, so they had to be strategic about their next move. Someone suggested reaching out to Black Snow outside as the top priority, but then a cold, cutting voice cut through the chatter, declaring that it was impossible. Theo explained that since Black Snow hadn't shown up, it was clear that their forces nearby had already been wiped out. That's why he'd led everyone deep into the castle to find another way to survive. Evelyn fired back that there was still a shot at turning the tables, rallying the group to never give up. She stressed that even a tiny opening could be their ticket out of this brutal setup. Theo pointed out that the enemy was busy wiping out even their own lackeys to cover their tracks completely. He hammered home that they needed to expose the truth before everything was erased in the rubble. Confidently, he predicted that the enemy would eventually come back to confirm their supposed victory, too hyped on their win to notice the missing bodies of his crew. He proposed that they hide under the debris to launch a surprise counterattack. Just one perfectly timed move might give them the chance to flip the situation around. His eyes burned with determination as he declared that this was the only way to win back the fight. Everyone exchanged resolute nods, gearing up for this high-stakes plan. Captain Trainer watched the young man intently, his eyes a mix of astonishment and respect. He quietly assessed Theo, recognizing that behind his youthful face lay an extraordinary will. The captain recalled how Theo had unlocked the mind gate all on his own at such a young age, a rare feat that few ever achieve. This revelation left him in awe, convinced of the incredible potential within the kid. Trainer sighed softly, silently chastising himself for having caved under pressure before. He admitted to feeling his age, no longer possessing the same reckless resolve he once had. Bending down, he picked up a piece of iron from the ground and gave a nod of approval for the sharp instincts of the new recruits. Scanning the eager faces around him, he felt a surge of trust in their determination and intellect. With that iron rod in hand, he struck the cold floor, the harsh sound echoing through the silence, a clear statement that they were ready to rise up and no longer let fear hold them back. Then, with a booming laugh, Captain Trainer declared that the white armored dragon cavalry would not just sit back and take it. Clenching the iron rod tighter, he vowed to help everyone smash the traitor's devious plan. He shouted out that they would follow the plan just as the black-haired man had laid out, calling the white armored dragon cavalry by name and ordering them to fall into their battle positions immediately. Theo and the red-haired warrior both rose to their feet, their eyes full of unwavering resolve. They urged their teammates to check their weapons and steel their minds, ready to charge into a fight with no mercy. Outside, the black-cloaked commander led a massive troop as they slowly advanced. He wore a cold, sinister smile, utterly convinced that the prey inside had run out of escape routes.